In November 2021, a group of workers in Kenya sat down at their computers and began reading. What they read included detailed descriptions of child sexual abuse, torture, bestiality, and self-harm as part of a large-scale labeling project that processed tens of thousands of toxic text samples. They were paid between $1.32 and $2 an hour to do it. Those workers were making ChatGPT safer for you. That's not a metaphor. When OpenAI was preparing to launch ChatGPT, OpenAI needed to build safety systems capable of minimizing what the model would and wouldn't say. Building those systems required humans to read through graphic and harmful content, label it, and feed that judgment back into the model. The product you've used was partly shaped by people earning $1.32 to $2 an hour to do it. Now here's the number that puts that in context. By March 2025, ChatGPT had 500 million weekly active users. By June 2026, the app hit 1 billion monthly active users. OpenAI's annualized revenue run rate crossed $20 billion in 2025. The company's valuation reached $300 billion in its SoftBank-led funding round that same year. Between $300 billion at the top and $1.32 an hour at the bottom sits a labor story that cuts to the center of how modern AI actually gets built. One that doesn't involve a single rogue company, a single bad contract, or a single country. It involves a system with enough hidden layers and diffused accountability that the gap has remained largely invisible. That's what this video is about, and once you see how the system works, you won't be able to unsee it. In November 2021, Sama received a $70 million investment from one of Canada's largest pension funds, which publicly praised the company's ethical hiring model. That same month, Sama began sending Kenyan workers descriptions of child sexual abuse, bestiality, and torture, material that OpenAI needed labeled in order to build ChatGPT's safety filters. That timing captures something important about how the industry works. Investors were buying not just labor capacity, but ethics branding. And Sama's ethical AI credentials had just been publicly reinforced at the exact moment the OpenAI project was underway. Sama was built around what its founder called impact sourcing, the idea that digital work should reduce poverty rather than simply arbitrage wages. Its founder, Leila Jana, built Sama in 2008 around one central idea, that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not, and that connecting low-income workers to dignified, living-wage digital work could be a genuine path out of poverty. The company became a B Corp. It attracted clients including Google, Meta, Microsoft, and eventually OpenAI. Its marketing described workers as being treated with dignity and respect, paid a living wage. Time magazine reviewed the payslips. The workers on the OpenAI project were taking home $1.32 to $2 an hour. OpenAI, for its part, was paying Sama $12.50 an hour for the service. That gap, somewhere between $10.50 and $11 per hour, depending on individual worker earnings, between what the client paid and what the worker received, is where the intermediary layer lives. And Sama is not a uniquely bad actor in that layer. It is the one that became the signature case, documented by Time with hundreds of pages of internal records, at a company whose product had reached hundreds of millions of users. Which raises a fairly direct question: if a gap this wide between ethical branding and documented pay rates is visible inside the company built around fair labor as a selling point, what does the rest of the industry look like? In 2025, a single sophisticated annotation on Scale's platform could cost as much as $100 in the post-training market. That's the market price of the task, not necessarily what the worker took home. Scale's Remotasks platform, independently rated by the Oxford-based Fairwork project, scored a 2 out of 10 on basic Fairwork criteria. That gap between what the premium end of the market pays and what the baseline conditions look like is the story of Scale AI in miniature. Scale was co-founded in 2016 by Alexander Wang and Lucy Guo, with a premise that turned out to be correct. The real bottleneck holding back AI development was labeled data. By 2019, Scale was worth over $1 billion. By May 2024, $14 billion. And in June 2025, Meta agreed to buy a 49% stake in the company, at a $29 billion valuation, putting Wang, at 28, at the center of what Reuters described as one of the most important infrastructure deals in the generative AI stack. Scale operates through contractor platforms including Remotasks and Outlier, the former oriented toward broad annotation work, the latter toward more specialized evaluation tasks. According to Reuters, Scale had contributors in more than 9,000 cities and towns worldwide, not employees, contributors. The distinction matters enormously because it determines what happens when something goes wrong. And here's how that plays out in practice. In early 2024, Remotasks abruptly locked Kenyan workers out of their accounts. CBS News reported that workers described accounts being closed just before payday, with no advance notice. What workers faced in that moment was a structure designed around diffused accountability. The platform, the intermediary, and the client company each sit in separate legal and operational layers, and the verified pattern across the industry, documented by Time, Reuters, CBS, and The Guardian, is that workers caught between those layers have weak bargaining power, limited recourse, and no collective mechanism that covers the specific platform they worked for. A 2026 report by SOMO found that Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Nvidia collectively use at least 30 intermediary companies for data work, and that the broader AI labeling sector contains at least 500 firms, 500 companies, many of which serve as a buffer between a trillion-dollar AI lab and the person who actually did the work. Fairwork rated Remotasks 2 out of 10. Amazon Mechanical Turk scored 0 out of 10. These are not outliers. These are the foundations. That was torture. That's how a Kenyan worker described the job to Time magazine in January 2023. The work involved reading graphic descriptions of child sexual abuse, murder, and sexual violence, earning between $1.32 and $2 an hour to do it. Mofat Okinyi was one of the Kenyan workers who labored in that pipeline, a former content moderator who helped label toxic content used to make ChatGPT safer. In September 2024, Time named him one of the 100 most influential people in AI, not because he raised a fund or shipped a model, but because he co-founded the Content Moderators Union, which Time described as Africa's first such union and which grew to more than 400 workers from several companies. He became, in other words, the person who decided that the workers at the bottom of the AI supply chain should have a name and a voice and a number to call. What's striking is how long it took for that to happen and what it cost in the meantime. The International Labour Organization surveyed data workers in developing countries in 2022. Average hourly earnings, $2.10, median, $1.20. In Kenya specifically, $1.10 per hour. Many of these workers held STEM degrees. The low pay was not because the work was unskilled. ILO data directly contradicts that assumption. It reflected a global labor market in which the work could be sourced from lower-wage countries where platform worker protections were limited or absent. Then, in March 2024, Remotasks, Scale AI's platform, abruptly locked Kenyan workers out of their accounts. CBS News reported that workers described accounts being closed just before payday. What the episode illustrated was a verified pattern across the industry: sudden platform exits, with workers facing weak bargaining power and limited recourse. In April 2026, after Meta ended its contract, SAMA announced 1,108 layoffs in Nairobi. A worker named Naftali Wambalo had told CBS News the previous year, "This job, I would normally pay $30 in the US, but because you are in Kenya, $2 is enough for you. That idea has to end." Later that same month, on April 28th, more than 700 workers at Covalent in Ireland, a company training Meta's AI systems, were told their positions were at risk. Wired reported that workers described refining Meta's AI moderation systems while facing layoffs justified by reduced demand and operational requirements. Workers said they were building the system that may replace them. The contrast with Scale AI's leadership is stark. In June 2025, when Meta agreed to a $15 billion, 49% stake in Scale AI, co-founder Alexander Wang moved into Meta's leadership. He was 28 years old. The workers did not receive a comparable transition. Think about the last time you used a voice assistant, or shared a video with an AI chatbot, or asked your phone's camera to identify something. In that moment, you probably assumed the processing happened between you and a server somewhere. Automated, private. Swedish newspaper Svenska Dagbladet, followed by The Verge, reported that Kenyan annotators, working under subcontracting arrangements connected to Meta, had been assigned to review footage captured by Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses. Footage that included nudity, sexual activity, bathroom scenes, and in some cases, visible bank card numbers and financial information. Over 7 million pairs of those glasses had been sold in 2025. Meta's official response was, media captured by its smart glasses stays on the user's device unless they choose to share it with other people or Meta. That's true. And when users shared content with Meta AI, which is the entire point of the AI feature, that content could enter a human review pipeline staffed by Kenyan annotators, operating under opaque subcontracting arrangements that privacy advocates and legal researchers flagged as raising serious questions about data protection oversight. The workers described what they saw in plain terms. We see everything, from living rooms to naked bodies. This is the part of the story that stops being about labor economics and starts being about something closer to home. The outsourced AI workforce is not just a cost center or a moral liability somewhere far away. It is, in a structural sense, the place where your data becomes visible to other human beings, people operating in lower-wage labor markets, under the same conditions of weak bargaining power and labor opacity that the broader pattern of AI data work documents. The same pattern appeared on Scale's Outlier platform in April 2026, where The Guardian reported that taskers had been assigned to scrape public social media profiles, work with copyrighted artwork, and process pornographic audio for AI training purposes. Outlier's recruiting page read, "Become the expert that AI learns from." The workers who spoke to The Guardian used different language. They described desperation, surveillance via hub staff, repeated unpaid AI interviews, and work they described as unsettling. The modern AI product is sold as a private, seamless experience between you and a machine. The reality is that between you and the machine, there is frequently a person, underpaid, weakly protected, and structurally invisible. On June 12, 2026, the International Labour Organization adopted a binding global convention on platform work. For the first time in history, an international legal instrument established minimum standards covering gig workers, including rules on minimum pay, protection against unjustified termination, requirements for algorithmic transparency, and worker safety standards. The ILO described it as the first binding global standards for gig and platform workers. Whether it changes anything in practice depends on governments, specifically whether the countries that host the largest concentrations of AI data workers choose to incorporate these rules into national law. Ratification and national incorporation typically unfold slowly, while the platforms these rules are designed to regulate have continued to shift vendors, restructure contracts, and redeploy workers in the interim. Meanwhile, the industry has begun presenting its own version of a solution. The argument goes roughly like this. The industry is moving from low-paid mass labelers toward high-paid domain experts. The Financial Times and Reuters both documented a shift towards specialists in physics, biology, finance, and other technical fields. Reuters noted demand for Math Olympiad-level mathematicians, for specialized evaluation and post-training work on frontier AI systems. Reuters reported that sophisticated annotations on Scale's platforms were in some cases costing as much as $100 per task. The Financial Times reported the same trend in July 2025. That shift is real, and it does not change the situation of the 1,108 workers laid off in Nairobi in April 2026. It does not change the situation of the more than 700 Covalan workers in Ireland whose jobs were put at risk that same month. It does not resolve the Fairwork score of 2 out of 10 for Remotasks, a platform that was still actively rated in 2025. The hierarchy is becoming more stratified. As the case file puts it, human labor is being recomposed into less visible and more stratified forms. The exploitative dynamics lower in the chain may continue regardless of what happens at the top. In June 2026, OpenAI published an essay about the future of AI. In it, they wrote, "Entirely automating everything is not the future we want." They're right. That is not the future that exists. The future that exists is one in which what CBS described as a global army of millions of people is embedded in AI systems, labeling, reviewing, ranking, moderating in ways that are structurally invisible to the people using those systems, and operating under weak or still developing legal protections in many of the jurisdictions where the work takes place. The AI revolution did not eliminate human labor, it buried it. And the only real question, the one that the ILO convention opens but does not answer, is whether the next generation of AI products will be built on the same foundation, or whether someone will finally decide that the people at the bottom of that supply chain are worth seeing.